The gray walls of the prison building loomed over Angela Gibbs as she walked across the courtyard to the maximum security unit. The February wind chilled her to the bone, making her wrap herself more tightly in her uniform jacket. After 5 years of service in the general ward, she'd been transferred to a new place, one that housed the most dangerous criminals. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind her. Warden Paige, a tall, gray-haired man with a military bearing, led her down a long corridor lit by dim lamps. Warden Paige's strict regimen has its own rules, Gibbs. No amateurishness, no indulgences. Everyone here is a potential threat. His voice echoed off the walls. Angela nodded silently, absorbing the new reality. The cells on both sides of the corridor, the bars, the smells of chlorine and unfreedom. The inmates saw her off with wary glances. A new guard is always an event. Warden Paige, your shift is from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. Post on the 3rd tier, cell block C. The shift supervisor is Mitchell. He'll fill you in. Paige handed her a bunch of keys and an electronic pass. The 3rd tier greeted her with silence. Here the cells were solitary, a luxury bestowed on those who behaved well. Angela walked slowly along the row, getting used to her new place. From cell number 312 came a soft singing, someone humming Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Intrigued, she peered through the observation window. A tall man was sitting on a bunk, leaning over a book. When he heard footsteps, he looked up, and Angela met the most piercing gaze of her life. Bright, almost transparent eyes looked calm and studying. Nicola Becker. Good morning, miss. Glad to welcome a new face to our haven. She nodded, noting the prisoner's unusual manner of speech, the impeccable ironed prison robe, the neatly made bunk, the stack of books on the desk. Everything gave him away as a man who retained his dignity even here. Angela Gibbs. Prisoner number? Nicola Becker. 24,785. Nicola Becker. He bowed his head slightly as if he were introducing himself at a social occasion. All day, Angela had been getting used to her new duty station. Block C was relatively quiet, with long-serving prisoners who had already accepted their fate. The shift supervisor, Mitchell, a stocky man with a red face, showed her around, introduced her to the security system, and told her the routine. By evening, she felt exhausted, not so much physically as emotionally. The new reality was pressing, making her wary every second. Leaving the cell block, she passed cell 312 again. Nicola Becker was still reading, but now at the window, catching the last rays of the February sun. At home, lying in bed, Angela remembered that gaze. Calm, studying, not at all like the hunted or aggressive gazes of the other prisoners. There was intelligence in it, some inner strength. What had put such a man behind bars? That question kept her awake until the morning. The staff room was quiet. Angela flipped through the pages of the personal file of prisoner number 24,785. The photograph on the first page was of Nicola Becker in an AER suit, clearly taken before his incarceration. The same piercing gaze, but a different facial expression, confident, even arrogant. Education, Yale University, Department of Economics. 6 years at a major investment firm, impeccable career, letters of recommendation. And then an armed bank robbery, the murder of a security guard. Angela read the dry lines of the protocol. Shot in the chest, death was instantaneous. Judy Brooks, studying our intellectual. The voice of Judy Brooks, the prison psychologist, made her wince. Judy Brooks, interesting case, went broke after the stock market crash, lost everything, went into debt to dangerous people. Classic fall story. Angela Gibbs, he doesn't look like a killer. Judy Brooks, what's a killer supposed to look like? Judy took a seat next to her. Judy Brooks, the worst crimes are often committed by those you least expect it from. The usual morning bustle reigned in cell block C. Breakfast delivery, cell checks, guard shifts. Passing cell 312, Angela slowed her step. Nicola stood by a wall on which a remarkably accurate portrait of a young woman had been drawn in pencil. Angela Gibbs, your work? Nicola Becker. Yes, my wife, ex-wife. He ran his hand over the drawing. Nicola Becker, drawing helps you keep the details in mind. The facial features, the curve of the lips, the look all fade from memory over time. Angela Gibbs, you draw beautifully. Nicola Becker, thank you. Went to art school before finances got tight. He smiled. Nicola Becker, you should have seen the Impressionists at the Orsay. Monet, Renoir, Degas. That's where the real art is. Been to Paris 3 times. The last time was 6 months before. He paused. Nicola Becker, I'm sorry, Miss Gibbs. I don't want to abuse your time. She should have walked away. She should have kept her distance. But something kept her in front of the camera. Angela Gibbs, what are you reading now? Nicola Becker, Camus, The Outsider. Surprisingly in tune with my situation. He picked up a book from the table. Nicola Becker, a man commits murder and can't explain why. Society judges him not so much for the crime as for his inability to play by the rules, to show the right emotions. Angela felt a chill run down her spine. He was talking about the murder as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. There was no remorse or fear in his voice, just thoughtfulness. Nicola Becker, do you like Camus? Angela Gibbs, I haven't read it. Nicola Becker, I can borrow it when I finish it. There aren't many connoisseurs of good literature here. That evening, checking the cells before lights out, she lingered again at 3:12. Nicola was asleep, the book resting on his chest. In his sleep, his face seemed almost serene. Angela watched him and thought about the man he had shot, also someone's husband, son, father. How to reconcile that fact with an intelligent man talking about art and literature? The prison library was located in the semi-basement of Cell Block C. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, prisoners were allowed to spend an hour there under the supervision of guards. Angela had volunteered to be on duty in the library. It provided a distraction from the monotony of the corridors. On this Thursday, Nicola was the only visitor. He moved slowly along the shelves, his fingers sliding along the spines of books. Angela watched him from her seat by the door. Nicola Becker, have you read Hemingway, Miss Gibbs? He pulled out a shabby volume. Nicola Becker, you know, I met his grandson in Paris. It was an amazing coincidence that we ended up in the same bar in Montmartre. Angela Gibbs, really? Nicola Becker? Yes, he was talking about his grandfather, a very different image from the one everyone knows. You know, I was thinking at the time how amazing life is, sitting in a Paris bar, drinking wine with the grandson of a great writer. Nicola fell silent, clutching the book. Nicola Becker. And then 6 months later, you're standing with a gun in a bank, and everything goes to hell. Angela tensed. They weren't allowed to discuss crime with prisoners, but Nicola continued, looking somewhere through the bookshelves. Nicola Becker, I didn't mean to kill anyone. I thought I'd just scare them, take the money, pay off my debts. The guard reached for his gun. I fired on reflex. He went down somehow, casual, just slumped to the floor. I still remember the look in his eyes, surprised like that. Angela Gibbs, you shouldn't talk about that. Nicola Becker, I know, but I have to tell someone. I've been carrying it around for 3 years. I see his face every night. He has 2 children left. I've recognized I've ruined more than one life, dozens of lives. And for what? For money. There was such genuine pain in his voice that Angela involuntarily stepped closer. Nicola Becker, it was a mistake. In the library, they should keep their distance. Nicola looked up. There were tears in his eyes. Nicola Becker, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have told you that. Angela Gibbs, it's okay. She wanted to add something else but faltered. The next Tuesday, they discussed Hemingway, then Fitzgerald. Talking about literature seemed like safe territory, but each time the line between prisoner and guard grew thinner. Judy Brooks was the first to notice the change. She ran into Angela in the staff mess hall. Judy Brooks, how's the high-security service treating you? The psychologist asked, stirring her coffee. Angela Gibbs, it's fine, calmer than I expected. Judy Brooks, I've seen you on duty in the library a lot. Interesting choice for a security guard. Angela Gibbs, I love books. Angela shrugged. Angela Gibbs, and conversations about them. Judy looked at her carefully. Judy Brooks, especially with some of the prisoners. Angela Gibbs, I don't know what you mean. Judy Brooks, get it right, Angela. The important thing to remember here is who's who. Sympathy is fine, but you can't forget where the line is drawn. Angela Gibbs, I remember my responsibilities. Angela stood up from the table. Judy Brooks? I hope so, Judy said quietly after her. That evening in the library, Nicola read aloud The Old Man and the Sea. His voice, soft and deep, filled the space between the shelves. Angela listened with her eyes closed. It seemed to her that they were somewhere far away from here, in a Parisian cafe, in a New York gallery, anywhere but the prison library. The springtime in the prison was particularly acute, the sunlight streaming through the barred windows, making the captivity feel more acute. Angela now spent almost all her shifts in the library. The other guards were glad. Few liked this boring duty. She and Nicola had created a ritual of their own. He read her favorite passages from books. She brought art magazines from the city library. Sometimes their fingers would touch when he handed her a book, and that touch burned. That afternoon, Nicola talked about his trip to Venice. Angela listened, leaning against the shelving unit, forgetting to keep her distance. Nicola Becker, you know what the most beautiful thing about Venice is? The air. It's soaked with history and art. Every breath is like a sip of eternity. He spoke softly, almost a whisper, looking into her eyes. Nicola Becker, you would fall in love with this city. The switch to you happened imperceptibly. Angela realized she couldn't remember when it happened. Angela Gibbs. I've never been to Europe. She lowered her eyes. Nicola Becker, we could go together someday. His hand touched her wrist. She had to pull away, should have been reminded of the rules. Instead, she froze, feeling the warmth of his fingers. Angela Gibbs, we're not allowed to... Nicola Becker, not allowed to... What? Dream? Feel? He took a step closer. Nicola Becker, you feel what I feel. Their first kiss happened right there between the dusty shelving units. Angela didn't remember who reached out first. Everything merged into a maelstrom of sensations, his lips, his hands, his whispers. Reality ceased to exist. That evening she stood under the shower, trying to wash away the guilt. What was she doing? How could she have let this happen? But the next morning she would walk to the library again, knowing he would be waiting. The notes began, little scraps of paper that she'd sneak out. Nicola wrote her poems, drew little sketches. She wrote back, tentatively at first, then more and more openly. Angela began to forge the library's visit log, writing in other inmates instead of Nicola. She began to ignore when he stayed longer than the allotted hour, brought him books that were forbidden by prison rules. One day, she caught him talking to another inmate in the hallway. Angela Gibbs, what was that about? Nicola Becker? Nothing much, just an exchange of pleasantries. He smiled. Nicola Becker, you know how important it is to maintain relationships here. Angela Gibbs, you're not allowed to talk to prisoners from other units. You're breaking the rules too. His voice grew harsher. Nicola Becker, or is it different for you? She remained silent. He was right. She had long ago overstepped every possible boundary. Angela Gibbs, I'm sorry. He hugged her. Nicola Becker, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just so hard here sometimes. You're the only thing keeping me afloat. Angela melted at those words. She didn't notice how gradually Nicola began to manipulate her. Little things at first, changing a journal entry, bringing a note to another prisoner, accidentally leaving the door of the staff room open. Nicola Becker, if you love me, you'll help me, he would say. It's such little things, nothing serious. Judy Brooks tried to talk to her again. Judy Brooks, Angela, I see what's happening. You're changing, becoming distracted, breaking protocol. It's a dangerous path. Angela Gibbs, you don't understand anything. Judy Brooks, I do more than you realize. He has a knack for making people fall in love with him. It's his defense mechanism, his way of surviving here. Angela Gibbs, you're wrong. There's nothing between us. Judy Brooks, then why are you blushing? Why are you protecting him? Angela ran out of the counselor's office. She didn't want to hear the truth. She didn't want to think about Nicola being able to use her. Nights, she lay awake, rereading his notes. Nicola Becker, my soul yearns for you like a moth to a flame, he wrote. Nicola Becker, you give me hope in this realm of shadows. Beautiful words that made her dizzy. And by day, she caught his glances through the bars, kissed him secretly in the library, risked her career and her freedom for a few minutes of intimacy. Her whole world had narrowed down to those encounters, to his touch, to his voice. She hadn't noticed how the other guards had begun to avoid her, how her superiors had begun to look more closely, didn't see the worry in Judy's eyes. Her existence was split in two, the gray reality and the vivid, passion-filled moments with him. Angela Gibbs, I'm going crazy, she whispered, snuggling against him in the tight space between the shelving units. Nicola Becker, we're both going crazy, he replied, kissing her neck. Nicola Becker, but isn't it a beautiful madness? Warden Paige's office was stuffy. Nicola Becker sat across the massive desk, keeping outwardly calm, but his fingers twitched faintly. Warden Paige, the application for parole is denied. Paige spoke in an even voice, looking down at the papers. Warden Paige. The board has deemed that given the severity of the offense, Nicola stopped listening. 3 years of good behavior, working at the library, participating in prison rehabilitation programs, all for nothing. He would stay here for another 9 years. At the library, Angela noticed the change in his mood immediately. Angela Gibbs, what happened? Nicola Becker, rejected. He tossed the book back on the shelf. Nicola Becker, you know what the funny thing is? I actually believed the system worked, that good behavior meant something. Angela Gibbs, I'm sorry. She tried to touch his arm, but he pulled away. Nicola Becker, sorry? You're sorry? His voice became hard. Nicola Becker, you know what I'm sorry about? That I'm wasting my time playing these games with you. Angela Gibbs, what are you talking about? Nicola Becker, I'm talking about the fact that you could help me, really help me, not carry books and notes. Nicola pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Nicola Becker, I have a phone and pictures of our meetings and all our correspondence. What do you think Paige will say when she sees these pictures, when she reads your declarations of love to the prisoner? Angela felt the ground go from under her feet. Angela Gibbs, you won't do that. Nicola Becker, why not? I have nothing to lose. But you? He smiled. Nicola Becker, how much do you get for associating with a prisoner, for carrying prohibited items, for forging documents? Angela Gibbs, I loved you. Nicola Becker, love? He laughed. Nicola Becker, you were a convenient tool. You think you're special? The first guard to lose her head to a prisoner? The next 3 days passed like a blur. Nicola demanded help in organizing the escape. He had thought of everything: who to bribe, what doors to open, when to act. Angela listened to his plan, feeling everything freezing inside. The prison laundry room was always damp and noisy. The rumble of the washing machines drowned out all sound. Angela knew the schedule. On Wednesdays, Nicola worked here alone. She walked in as he was folding clean sheets. Angela Gibbs, I'll take it. I'll help you run. He turned to her, a familiar cocky smile on his face. Nicola Becker, I knew you'd make the right decision. The heavy wrench lay on the tool shelf. Angela saw it every day as she surveyed the room. The blow hit him in the temple. Nicola didn't even realize what was happening. He collapsed between the washing machines, blood gushing from the wound. The second blow was unnecessary, but she couldn't stop. A third, fourth, fifth. The sound of wet blows mingled with the noise of the machines. Angela was methodical. Wiped the key, put it back, checked the security cameras. There were none in the laundry room, only in the hallway. She knew they were rarely checked at this hour. In cell block D sat Ray Harris, known for his aggressiveness. 2 days ago, he'd had an altercation with Nicola in the cafeteria. Angela falsified the laundry log, putting Harris in it. The body was discovered an hour later. Screaming, commotion, sirens blaring. Angela stood in the cordon with the other guards, watching the medics cover the body with a black bag. There wasn't a speck of blood on her uniform. Angela Gibbs, how awful, she said to Judy Brooks. Judy looked at her with a long stare but said nothing. In the evening, Angela burned all the notes from Nicola. In the ashes, she saw a scrap of the last one. Nicola Becker, you give me hope in this realm of shadows. A bitter laugh came to her throat. The next day, Detective Arnold Farmer of the Major Crimes Unit came to the prison. Angela saw him talking to Paige, studying the crime scene. It seemed to her that every glance he gave her was directed at her, but she'd thought of everything. There was no trace. Harris had motive. Journal entries confirmed his presence in the laundry room. The perfect crime.